Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us all this truth through a well. Shalom to the Akim out there in the Aqua, listening and learning, increasing in the spirit and power of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. This is going to go to, the topic of having more than one wife, which we brothers at Great Millstone, we know that, it's not unlawful, okay, to have more than one wife, but it's also not recommended, it's not recommended simply to the fact that, we have a job to do. If we have a woman, it's cool, we deal with her, but like Apostle Paul said, he would rather us not having a woman, than to be dealing with one, because, you know how the drama is, and that takes us away from what this truth is, man. That drama of being after and chasing after a woman and worrying about all that stuff that comes with it. There's a burden that has to be carried, and us as brothers, we don't get emotional about this type of stuff, but you tell a woman, any of this stuff, even if she so-called calls herself to be in the truth, she'll act like a demon, all right, and she'll try to ignore, all right, the fact of men can have more than one woman, and like I said, we don't advise it, not saying we don't condone it, but we don't advise it just because we have a thing to do, man. All those things that we wish for, which all of us, we want all that stuff, and all those things we wish for is going to be added unto us, but in the kingdom, that's when you're going to have women in a correct state of mind. They're going to be made in perfection, okay, of what they should be. And you're even going to have women in the kingdom, all right, that are your wives, that are going to be looking for more wives for you, It's going to be set up that way, man, But for now, what is given to us is to preach this gospel, to increase in wisdom, knowledge, understanding, all right, and to be meek along the way, So 1 Corinthians 7:1 in the KJV is, now concerning the things whereof ye wrote unto me, it is not good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So for, going through different translations, getting a good understanding of it, when you go in the NIV, all right, which is a different NIV, you have a bunch of NIVs, man. I actually have 3 pulled up right now, that I'm going to get into, because it explains, and it goes into having multiple women or different, women in relationships. Now, something that we also, that we talk about is, going around and just smashing whoever, that's also not something we really condone. We know brothers have to get their rocks off or whatever the case is, but the main thing is the scriptures, man. So it says in NIV, 1 Corinthians 7:1, now for the matters you wrote about, all right, which is what the people wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But since sexual immorality is occurring, all right, because in that time you have to understand what's going on. All right, you had in the Corinthians going after the ways of the Greek, where the father would go into the mother, and then the son would go into the mother, and then the father would go into the son's wife, and it was all kinds of immorality, all right, sexual immorality, and you had women that was jumping onto one man, and then she would go and leave him and go to another man, okay? That is sexual immorality, Homosexuality also goes into sexual immorality, and bestiality goes into sexual immorality, which there was a lot of that going around in that time, That's why the Apostle Paul, when he would write to the Corinthians, to the Romans, and so on and so forth, all right, he would tell them that they were babes, okay, because they were barely coming into this truth, barely understanding it. And that's why in the book of Acts, you had the apostles come together, have a council, and have a standard set for the brothers and the sisters that were freshly coming into the truth, you know, because you have women that say, you know, understand now that they're Israelites, and they'll jump onto an Israelite man that's a teacher, and then they won't be feeling them so much anymore. After a while, jump onto another one, and so on and so forth. And that's how it goes, man. And that's how a lot of these women are, thinking that they have some type of sexual freedom, all right, in this truth, when it should not be that way. You know, you're stuck with who you are, you know. So it says, but since sexual immorality is occurring, okay, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife, and each woman with her own husband, you know. So it wasn't about, you know, you're only supposed to have one wife forever. Now we know that the bishops, okay, and men that are striving to be those high priests, you know, it's a good thing for them to keep themselves with one woman. You know, it's a good thing for them to keep themselves in order, you know, because having multiple women and being a high priest has so much toll on the body, you know, not necessarily the flesh, which it will, all right, but also on the body, the spiritual body, Yahweh Hashem Yahushai, the brothers, you know, because they're looking up at you as the teacher, you know. And then if you're over here struggling, you know, with one woman and another woman and another woman, look what happened to King Solomon. You know, he got so involved with women, eventually he started turning away from the Lord, man. You know, and that's something that you don't want. And like I said, if the Most High blessed you with another woman, you know, and those women are cool with it, and whatever the case is, then that's fine, man. You know, that's your lot. That's what was given to you, but it's not advised. You know, coming from Apostle Paul, even Apostle Tahar, you know, and even the brothers, man. So it says 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 2, but since sexual immorality is occurring, each man should have sexual relations with his own wife. You know, you choose one and you stay with that one. You know, you don't make it more complicated because you don't understand that much. You see, again, going back to the book of Acts, how the apostles set up a standard for those freshly coming into the law, statutes, and commandments, for those freshly coming into the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the scriptures. You know, abstain from blood. You know, stay away from what is that word? Meat offered unto idols. You know, you stay away from animals that were strangled. You know, you don't eat that food. You know, there's a lot of stuff that goes back to those standard that the apostles put forth. Goes all the way back to the book of Leviticus 17, the book of Leviticus 18. You know, thou shalt have no other Lord. You know, no other gods. Don't bow down to any other god. You know, abstain from sexual immorality. I believe it was 4 in total, and it was don't bow down to any other gods. Abstain from sexual immorality. Stay away from the blood of the animal. You know, you don't eat your food with blood, okay, because that blood represents the life. And if the animal's dead, then that blood should have been drained, you know, and not eaten, you know, and staying away from strangled food, you know. So there's 4 that the apostles came up with, you know, that go back to the law, statutes, and commandments of the scriptures, you know, and what's it called, Salak. And you know, that was just to get them started, so they would have some type of standard coming into this truth, just like us. You know, coming into this truth, one of the first things is you don't eat pork, you don't eat unclean foods, and that was it. You know, and then from then you go little by little. Okay, you understand the Sabbaths now, you can start keeping them better. right? Okay, you understand this, you can do a little more, you can do a little bit more of this, so on and so forth, man. All right. So when it comes to sexual immorality, it's not talking about having more than one wife. All right. The immoralities is talking about illicit sexual intercourse, right? So it says illegal, forbidden by laws, rules, or customs, which really it goes back to laws. When you go to Leviticus 18, the sexual intercourse with close relatives and so on and so forth, and also, one man having sex with multiple women at one point, at the same time. That's sexual, immorality. That's confusion, and you had a lot of that stuff going on too, orgies. You had a lot of that stuff going on in that time, man, and that's the difference. We don't condone that stuff. That's not supposed to be done. That's against the law, So illicit, that means forbidden sexual intercourse. And it goes back to where? Leviticus 18, which tells you nothing about having more than one wife. It's about having intercourse with close relatives. It tells you who you can and cannot. Okay? It tells you cannot do it with beasts, with animals. You can't do it with the same sex, right? You can't do it to your sister, your brother. You can't do it to your father, your mother. You can't do it to your father's sister, your father's brother. You can't do it to your mother's so like you can't do it to your mother's sister or your mother's brother. You can't do it to your wife's sister. All right. You can't marry the same sister. Why? Because there's going to be strife in between the two sisters. It says as long as that sister's living, okay, your wife, as long as the wife is living, you cannot marry her sister. Why? Because of the hate that's going to be brought in between them. You see what happened with Rachel and Leah. So it says, C, sexual intercourse with a divorced man or a woman, all right, which is what a woman would get, laid down with a man. After she was done with him, she would go to the next. You can't do that. There's laws, there's regulations, there's rules, there's commandments, that you have to follow, So it says fornication, all right? Then it goes into the word fornication, which when you go all the way up here, the word is porneia, all right? Porneia, which goes to what? Porn, right? Looking at a woman being taken, which is what they used to have. They used to have watch parties. They still do, okay? The higher up elites, they still do all that stuff, man. They still have the orgy parties, watch parties, do whoever you want to do parties, where the men and the women dress as animals, and they'll go up to a man and then do a man right there, and then the man will turn around and do that man, and he'll keep walking, see a woman, and he'll do that woman. And then that woman will do another woman. They'll do all kinds of wickedness, man. And that confusion was brought to the Israelites' attention, trying to adopt the customs of the Greeks, So going back into 1 Corinthians 7, and now I'm going to read this one, all right, which is another NIV version. It says, now, verse 1, now for the matters you wrote about, it is good for a man not to marry. But since there is so much immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. You see? So they were trying to separate, all right, no more multiple women, all right, because there's just so much confusion going on at that time, Just like whenever you have a lot of brothers, that are, or not brothers, but you have a lot of people coming into this truth calling themselves GMS, where it gets to the point where the apostles can't really keep track of everything all the time. That would be impossible, man. Keeping track of every single person coming into this truth, calling themselves GMS. Then they have to go through each person individually and look and see what they teach and what their doctrine is. What do the apostles say? They say no more people coming in. Okay? No more people coming in. You got a camp that you go to. You go to that camp. You learn off of that camp. If those brothers, all right, because in the Roman army, you had legions. You had centurions, which were in charge of 100. And then you had legions, which was thousands. I forgot exactly how many. And then you had commanders and so on and so forth, where it was, 10 in charge, 100 in charge. And then you had 100,000 or 10,000. And then you had 100,000, so on and so forth, man. And the ones that were in charge at the very, very top, say Caesar, okay, he couldn't keep track of everybody that he had. That's why he had other leaders, and that's the same thing that happened with the apostles at that time and in this time. They bring the judgment down to the elders, of the camp. You see, so in that time you had, the apostles that didn't really have, a bunch of brothers leading camps, in different places, to keep track of the big flood of people coming in, so they set up a standard. For now, just have one woman, and that's it. That's all you can have. Don't go outside of that. And then later on, it was a smarter thing to have one woman, because you didn't have all these women, fighting over who should be the main one or so on, whatever the case is, man. You know how women think, So here's another one. This is 1 Corinthians 7:1, verse 2, I mean. It says, but since there is so much immorality, okay, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. You see? And that's because there was so much immorality going on. Not because you can't have multiple women. And not just multiple women. You can't just go out there and say, oh, that she looked fine, I'm going to take her in as another wife. We're not in the kingdom to look at a woman just based off of being fine, because we know she's going to be righteous regardless. We're in this flesh, man. We're in this world, and this world is wicked. All right? The wives are wicked. The children are wicked. Everybody's wicked, man. The wine is wicked. Everything is bad in this world. You see? So that's why the main focus is the scriptures, Otherwise, King David would have been wicked for having multiple wives, for even having the wives of, what's it called, that the Most High gave him that belonged to King Saul. King Saul. So even the things that seem to be, wicked to this world, man, it was given to us through the Spirit that those things aren't wicked. Okay? Those things are not wicked. So this is, with that being said, let me get that one with David having multiple wives, because the Most High gave him that. So is the Most High wicked for giving David multiple wives? It's just simple questions, simple answers, that a woman is going to try and be sensitive about. It says, 1 Samuel 25:36, and Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king, and Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. And at this time, King David already had a wife, right? It says, wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning. But it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. All right, he had a heart attack. It says, and it came to pass about 10 days after that Yahweh smote Nabal, that he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be Yahweh, he hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For Yahweh hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. You see, so Abigail became a wife of David, right? And David already had a wife. You know, David already had a wife, and he got in more wives. You see, there's another one in 2 Samuel. You know, these are just a couple of them I'm hitting, trying to, just doing a quick hit. This is 2 Samuel 12 and verse 7. And Nathan said to David, thou art the man, right? Because he took the wife of, that was of Urias. It says, Uzziah, Salak. It says, Nathan said to David, thou art the man. Thus saith Yahweh, the God of Israel, I anointed thee king over Israel, and delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house, and thy master's wives in thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover had given unto thee such and such things. Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of Yahweh to do an evil in his sight? Thou hast killed Uriah, or Uriah Salak, the Hittite, which is an Israelite, with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. You see? So when you look up the word, and that's just proof that the Most High isn't a man or isn't a woman, in the sense that, women are going to get sensitive about these things. The Most High is plain, point blank period. A man can have many wives, right? King David had many wives. King Solomon had many wives. But the difference is when you have that many wives in the flesh, all right, there are things that start coming and creeping upon you. You saw how King David almost slipped up, by taking that woman that belonged to another man. So he stayed away, which is a smart thing to do. You got a married woman trying to get with you, you stay away, right? So what happened? The Most High delivered that woman to King David by taking out her husband, which now she's lawful to marry, So when King Saul was taken out, all his wives were given to who? King David. You think King Saul had a bunch of old-ass wives? He had young, marriageable women, as every king always does, right? Let's look up the word adultery, and we'll end it on that. Exodus 20 and 14. Salak. Exodus 20 and 14. Thou shalt not commit adultery, right? Women say, oh, that's men that are married too. Nay. All right. Thou shalt not commit adultery. 14, that word adultery is na'ap, which is to commit adultery, usually of man. All right. And that bulletin right below it goes with it, always with a wife of another. So if a man commits adultery, it's because it's with a wife of another man. You see? Always. It's always going to be with a wife of another. If she's married and you go in unto that woman, that's adultery. All right? B, adultery of women. All right? Adulterous relationship, to commit adultery of man, adultery of women. All right? Adulterous worship. All right? So it starts with the woman, right? If the woman is married and she goes out and commits adultery, all right, she should be put to death. If the man didn't know, all right, he'll be okay. All right, only she would be put to death. But if the woman is married, she goes out and commits adultery, and the man knew, he's put to death along with her. The same thing if the man goes in unto the woman and didn't know that she was, it's in the law. It's actually in the law. If the woman is single, she's not with somebody, and a man goes in unto her, all right, forcefully, then they're married, okay, and he has to pay the father. If the man goes into the woman and she is married and he didn't know and she doesn't scream, then she's going to be put to death. If the man goes unto a woman that's married and he knows and she knows and she doesn't scream, okay, then both of them are going to be put to death. If the man goes into a woman that's married and she screams, then only he will be put to death. Okay? It's simple. It's really simple, man. Scriptures, are given unto us for this light and guidance, and, people make it out something that it's not. Right? So the adulteress is always of a woman, always of a wife of another, So that would be what? Sexual immorality, But if the woman is free to marry, okay, then it's not a sin to marry her, right? Which means what? You go in unto her. What happened in Genesis chapter 26 and verse 61 or 26? I believe it's maybe 27. Where, let me see. It's like my mind just blinked out. Might have been this one. 67, Salak. Genesis 24:67, and Isaac brought her into her mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So how did it happen? Because Isaac went in unto her sexually, right? Took her, and she became his wife. It's point blank period. A man can have many wives. All right, we don't advise it. It's not smart. That's why the Apostle Paul did that in the book of Corinthians and made that statement, because of women and because of this faith that we carry that we're supposed to put out there. When the time comes, those women will come too, right? And that's at the end. Thy people will be willing. The women will be willing to accept that other women can come in because they're going to be scared. They're not going to want to be kicked out, So I hope that was edifying. With that, I want to give all honor, glory, and praise unto Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakakwadash, Shalom.